Alright, what's going on guys? My name is Logan with West Desert Wheeler. In today's video, I'm going to give you guys a full breakdown and look inside of my Tiger King Capra. This is the absolutely most modified I've ever taken a Capra to. It's got lots of modifications, lots of great upgrades in here, and this car is performing really well. I have a ton of fun with this car, and honestly, it's probably the rig that I drive the most. If I'm going into a new area, I usually grab this car to find the new lines and then take out my other rides later. Short backstory, when I first started my channel, my first video on here was actually with my first Axial Capra. That one started out as an RTR. Later on, I put rear steer on that car. The rear steer Capra did not exist at the time of me purchasing that one. And then I got a second Capra. That was my green and black one. That started out as just a cage and a transmission that I ended up getting from a friend and turned that one into a car. I ended up selling that car to my brother, and I got Axial hooked me up with a Axial Capra kit. So straight rear axle, and that's what this car is. This car started life as an Axial Capra kit, and here it is today. What's kind of funny is I owned two at the time, and when I first started it, I kind of mocked myself as like, well, I don't want to just make another brushless 2.2 stretched Capra, and that's exactly what I have here. So great car. I'm gonna go ahead and pull the skins off of this thing, hose it off with an air hose real quick, and then we're gonna take a deep dive look and see exactly what every single part in here is. Really looking forward to it. I've been wanting to share this one with you guys for a little while. Let's check it out. All right guys, so here is the car. It is all naked and stripped down, and it's got most of the sand out of there, but you're never gonna get it all out. Believe me, I've tried. Anyway, I did something that I do not recommend that you do. I added up the total of the retail pricing on every upgrade I've done to this car. I want you guys to drop a comment down below, your guess on what you think this car costs to build. If you were to buy everything retail, brand new, and rebuild and clone this, what do you think this car costs? Go ahead and drop a comment now before we get into the details of what a rear steer Capra. I'll give you some quick cheats real quick. Metal axles, metal transmission, and good servos, good electronics, good motor and ESC. What do you think that's worth? I bet you're low. Just gonna go ahead and say this. I just recorded this whole video and it took way too long to get through. So I'm gonna kind of get through this. Let's talk about where this build started. So first thing I did was a UC Fab flat skid, which also has the adapter for a 3-gear transmission. The 3-gear transmission I'm using in this thing is a Vanquish products. This is clear anodized, is the choice that I went with. And then I also got the Vanquish dig unit on here. This is their Hertz Dig V3. Now fitting it into the cage, the original Vanquish dig unit goes straight back. So I also have the UC Fab Capra dig servo mount. So instead of going straight back, which would normally sit like where the fuel cell is, it clocks at 90 degrees and it sits in here nice and tight up to the cage. Just perfect. So great work there, UC Fab. With that servo, you also need to use a shorty servo. So the servo that I'm using to dig is a bit overkill. It's the Spectrum S6250 is the model on that one. Fast servo, shifts in and out really great, high torque, it's fast, perfect dig servo. It's just it's a little overkill for that. Speaking of servos, in the rear we've got its brother, the Spectrum 6280, which is the full length, so a little bit stronger and really nice. I like the silver on silver. That all turned out great. Pinion size on the motor here is a 14 tooth going into the Hertz dig or Vanquish transmission, I should say. Let's talk about the brushless motor and ESC setup in here, which is the Hobbywing AXE system. So separate motor and ESC. The Fusion doesn't have enough speed to get what I want out of this car. I originally tried it. It also doesn't fit with the UC Fab mount there. The 540L motor is like the absolute limit of what works with this mount, just because of the Capra's dimensions. That's what you get with this setup. I really like the AXE system though, great low speed control, and with this much gearing going to the wheels, I have incredible low speed control. I really enjoy it. This is a 2800 kV system, so I run it on 3S all the time. With the 14 tooth pinion, gives me a pretty good little bump in wheel speed. I can usually bump up most walls that I'm trying to get up, but it's a pretty slow car overall. Full throttles a little faster than like a quick walk. So I can take it down a trail if I want, if I'm chasing the car. So the original parts on here that I really just haven't changed, like the last remaining parts, are the axial cage, and I haven't modified it. I guess I did chop the back to give me a little more room on that rear servo. Normally there's a tube that comes out and then across underneath this rear bar, but I chopped it and then sanded it off so it's nice and clean looking. And then I've also got the original axial shocks on there as well. So pretty happy with the shocks overall. I don't hate them. I know a lot of people do. They do leak really bad, but I don't really care. I do have plans in the future to pick up new ones, maybe Traxxas big bores, maybe Desert Lizards. I haven't fully decided which way I want to go, which is why they're still the original axles. Coming out of the Vanquish transmission, I went with metal drive shafts. So these are the incision drive shafts, and that is because it has a universal joint to allow more angle. The reason I needed more angle is because the transmission outputs are offset. So it's offset on the wrong side for the rear axle because it's offset for the correct side on the front, which is how Vanquish built it, which is how it should be. However, I'm the idiot who put a front axle on the back. Vanquish, I know, didn't intend for this to be done. So the offsets on the wrong side puts a lot of angle on that rear drive shaft. And I had to change what I was doing I had to change to a metal drive shaft with the universal to help with the angle on that, as well as I use longer rod ends in the rear to stretch the rear to help eliminate some of that angle. The further back you go, the less angle that drive shaft sits on. Yeah, let's talk about the axles next. So axles are the Vanquish products, Capra axles. They're both a front axle. That's how I have my rear steer there. And like I say, they're both offset. So the rear axle is just a Vanquish front. That's all it is. There are some companies that make a centered axle, but the fit and finish on these axles is unmatched by any company. So I went with Vanquish on there. For tie rods on these both have a bow to them. The front is an in the works RC. I don't really care that it's brass. I just wanted the large bow and arch in the front, and that really allows for full travel on your steering without your tie rod bumping into the pumpkin of your axle. And then the Vanquish also has the bow in there, and it touches the pumpkin of the axle right as the steering hits the bump stops as well. With these axles, you can get some pretty aggressive steering angle. And then they also changed the caster on here, which means the knuckle sits on an angle compared to the square face of the pumpkin on here. So your pinion comes out flat. You get more caster, which allows for a different steering setup than the stock axles do. In the front, I run the pinion flat. In the rear, I run the pinion clocked up just a little bit because I don't need that much caster on the rear. I don't really want to get into explaining caster in this video, but yeah, my rear sits up a little higher than my front does. Front steering servo is a Spectrum 1212. So like 650 ounce-inches of torque. I really like it. It's waterproof for like $95. It's a ton of torque. I really like my Savox servos. Did I call it a Spectrum? Uh-oh. A Savox 1212 is what that is. Got a Vanquish servo horn on the front, and then I just got the metal axial on the rear because that's 23 tooth horn on the back, 25 tooth horn on the front. For the servo mounts, they are back ordered from Vanquish. That is a future mod I want to do, possibly. Although last weekend I took it out, took a tumble, and actually snapped the servo mount instead of breaking internal gears or something in the servo. So maybe that's a good weak link to have in the system for when the car takes a hard hit. From the axles, we're going out to Trio aluminum knuckles, which I really like the aluminum. I didn't want to go full brass on this thing. It's already kind of a pig. It's pretty heavy. So the Trio, I don't get quite as much steering angle as the plastic knuckles do. Maybe a little bit of Dremel work later can resolve that. On the front only, I've got portal covers from Hot Racing, 48 grams a piece, maybe together. I don't know grams very well. So a little bit of weight up front just to help hold that nose down on very steep climbs. And they're flat with the portal face. I have another set of Capra portal cover weights that like tuck around the edges and all that. These are a little bit lighter than those ones are, so pretty happy with that. Another thing I have to keep the nose down on steep climbs are these shock bands. These are from my buddy Dustin at D's company. And yeah, so if I get real steep, these shock bands help hold the cage and essentially everything else behind the cage down closer to the ground so that the nose doesn't unload on me and the car flip over backwards. And these have been working really good for me. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Dustin. That's a great part right there, dude. And you guys should definitely check out D's company on Instagram. Moving on out from the front weights, inside the portal boxes, we have an overdrive gear set from Hot Racing. I think it's the 1322 if memory serves. It's like 11% overdrive in the front axle only. Rears are the stock portal gears, nothing special there. And then ring and pinions are both the stock gearing. So nothing real crazy going on there, no wild overdrive. With the dig unit, I can do all sorts of fun stuff with the front end, burn it around, do cool maneuvers and whatnot. So I don't need a crazy amount of overdrive in this car. Yeah, 11% is all this one's running. All right, guys, let's dig into wheels and tires. The wheels, Amazon 2.2 bead locks. In the future, I'd really like to try and pick up a set of Spec RC 2.2s, but the books were closed at the time that I bought these. And so I did what I had to get this thing out on the rocks. In the future, expect to see this thing rolling on some Spec RC wheels. For the tires, these are custom tires. These are 1.9 Proline Krawlers that are originally 4.75 inches tall. I sent it off to one of my buddies who did tire modifications to it where they slice the tire and then they take a fifth tire and then cut that thing into like 20% chunks. You can see the cut lines right there where he inserted more tire into it, and you get an overall taller tire. The spec I asked for was 5.25 tall. These are pretty dang close to that. Really happy with how they turned out. And then I get the nice Proline G8 compound on the Krawler. It's one of my favorite compounds, one of my favorite tires. This was worth putting together. I had to send him 3 pairs of tires, so 6 tires to create 4 of them. So awesome mod. The 5.25 height is just perfect for a slightly stretched Capra. I wanted to go bigger than 4.75, and this is big enough to notice a difference in size, but not so big that it becomes top heavy and weird on climbs. I don't like big balloon crawlers or big balloon tires on the 2.2s. What's cool is the original 1.9 width too. So they're not real wide. They're still a tall, skinny tire. On the 2.2s, these look like a scale 42-inch tire with the 20-inch wheel. And overall, I'm really happy how those turned out. They were not inexpensive though. So you had to buy 3 sets of tires, and I paid for labor to have those converted. And yeah, this is the most expensive tire by far that I own. But you know, sometimes you got to pay to play. Inside, we've got dual stage foams from Krawler Innovations. 1.9 inch foams with a hard, you know, normal dual stage hard foam towards the beadlock ring. I stretched that onto the 2.2. It stops it from sliding side to side as much. And then you got the outer open cell foam, 4.75 height, but I chose the medium compound on those foams. So it gives it a nice feel once they've opened all the way up to these 5.25s. They actually do balloon all the way out larger than 5.25. So these are full of foam, but they're just soft to the touch, which is, I like a good soft tire, but I also like the dual stage to stop from the tires rolling over on themselves as I get myself into trouble. For controller, I have a Flysky GT5 receiver in here. I think it's the BS6. It's a 6-channel receiver that controls everything from the dig unit, throttle steering, rear steer, and I can also add light if I want to on there. And I guess I no longer have the option of an ESC fan. But yeah, I run the Flysky controller. It's got the potentiometer up top, so I throttle with my left index, steer the front with my thumb, and then I can use my right hand and control the rear steer knob, which typically I'm holding my GoPro and controlling rear steer and driving all at the same time. But you know, you gotta do what you gotta do for you guys. So in the end, guys, if I were to go and clone this car full retail with all these upgrades I've done to this thing, this is going to cost you $2,400, which is not an inexpensive car. But even at that, there's still more I want to do to this thing. So a couple of the upgrades I'd like to do, like I mentioned, the Spec RC 2.2 wheels. Like I mentioned, the shocks at some point, I'd like to do something different. Just haven't figured out which direction I want to go with those. I've thought about doing the Vanquish servo mounts. Those would be really nice, tie everything together, but I also like that it's plastic and it's kind of a weak point to save my servo potentially. One other thing I'd like to do, maybe some lit LED lights, do some rock lights to get some cool colors and change up the look of it. I do quite a few night runs in the summer when it's real hot, so it would be nice to have a little more rock lighting going on. And then finally, I'd really love to do a metal cage, whether it's a UC fab, that's my #1 choice, a super shafty Capra chassis. That's billet sides with chassis spacers. Those look really good. I like those cars a lot. They're just a little bit pricey. And then finally the RC Speedy R1, I believe it is. It looks like a little moon buggy and super cool chassis for sure. I would like to do a metal cage at some point. I am fully aware that it's not going to increase performance most likely, but you know, sometimes it's more about the look, and I really would like to have like a little moon buggy car running around. It'd be super rad. But I will say the Capra cages are pretty damn tough. Outside of breaking these pillars right here for the windshield, I've never broken anything significant outside of that. I did chop the rear of my cage to modify it a little bit back there, give me a little more clearance on that rear servo. But outside of that, it's kind of the original car. So definitely not going to complain there. I greatly appreciate you guys sticking with me through all this. I know there's a lot of talking about the Axial Capra. Let me know if you've got one. Let me know what your favorite modification to your car is. Definitely my favorite free mod is going to be taking the spring cups out of the stock shocks. Instead of letting the springs sit up here, once you remove the spring cups off the bottom of your shock shaft, it just drops down and hits the double shear mount. And then the car sits about a ½ inch lower, lowers your center of gravity, better for steep climbs, better for maximum articulation. It's also better for side hilling because your car is lower. It's all around just great, and I highly recommend doing it on your car, and it's completely free, and there's no permanent modification. If you don't like it, put them back in, you're good to rock and roll. The other modification I did was to the interior. Had to cut that out to get my transmission spur gear to the cover for the spur gear to fit correctly without just like completely bulging out in the interior. But I think that's pretty much covered it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. Definitely hit the affiliate links down below. I'll try and link to as many upgrades as I can down there, and I'll try and link to whoever else I mentioned in this thing. I definitely want to send a big shout out to Axial themselves. They've been really great to work with. Vanquish products, they've been great to work with. And then Spec RC, all my other buddies out there. So really awesome car. I have a ton of fun with it. It's one of my favorites to grab and take off, hit the trails with. I think you guys know that because my channel is full of Axial Capra content. If you want to see the car on the rocks, I've got a playlist for Axial Capra. Go check it out. We will see you guys in the next one. Keep the rubber side down.